We're going to move on to the next speaker for today. So next up, we have Simranjeet Singh. Simranjeet was an optometry student studying at Aston University. He founded the Aston University Khalistan Society and is a volunteer at the Dashmesh Book Club. Simranjeet has a keen interest in contemporary Sikh history and is working on creating an archive looking at the Sikh homeland movement. Today, he will be talking to us about the Khalistan Council in Quito, Ecuador. Please welcome Simranjeet.
Okay, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you to Nishan for hosting me today. So last year I was very fortunate to speak about the political history of Dr. Jagjit Singh Chohan and his role in the Sikh homeland movement. And since my time at university, I've been reading heavily looking at UK Sikh history and contemporary Sikh history. And Dr. Jagjit Singh Chohan is a forgotten protagonist of not only UK Sikh history, Panjab Sikh history, and also a key protagonist in the Khalistan movement. So today, as Apanpreet mentioned, my title is the Khalistan Council in Quito, Ecuador. And today we'll be looking to answer the questions of who, when, why, and how. Before I do go straight into my PowerPoint and my presentation, I do pay homage to two individuals who you can see at the top of my screen. Sardar Bikram Singh Dev from Winnipeg, and Sardar Singh a local Singh here in my hometown of Warsaw. These two figures were very influential. They were two hardworking individuals, and they were involved in the Khalistan Council. I'm very grateful to Anok Singh Dhillon from Vancouver, who was the grandson of Sardar Bikram Singh Dev, and some of the photos which you will see are from him. And below are the five individuals, including Jagjit Singh, who was given the role as ambassador in Ecuador, as we will find out today. So before we go to 1984-85, I want to take you back to 1849. And many of you will know that 1849 was an instrumental year and ultimately led to the annexation of the Sikh domains. And many of you will know about Maharaja Duleep Singh and how he was brought to England and then later having the desire to return back home. And he deputed Sardar Thakur Singh Sandhanvalia, who we can see on the far right. And he acted as the president of Maharaja Duleep Singh's government in exile back in the 19th century. And then we move over to Dr. Jagjit Singh, who I will be speaking very briefly about now. He was a former finance minister in the Panjab State Government, as many of you may have time to read the news clipping from the beginning. And during his time in the Panjab State Government, he realized that the Punjab was being robbed by central government, the Indian state. And he came to the conclusion that the Sikh nation had to continue the struggle for independence and to reclaim lost glory. And he studied here in London as well in the late 60s and had family here in Leamington. And so in 1971, he came to Leamington, where he met figures such as Devinder Singh Parmar, Charan Singh Panchi, Sadhu Singh Dhillon, Pyara Singh Sandhu, who were the original Khalistanis in the UK at the time. Following the emergency period launched by Indira Gandhi, Dr. Jagjit Singh Chohan was still residing in England, where he went to America, Canada, Germany. He went very far, continuing propagating the idea of an independent Sikh state. When Indira Gandhi came back to power, he once more came back to the UK to live in Leamington, where he stayed for 21 years here in exile. And we can all see a little news clipping from Diaspora Sikh from June 1980. And so simultaneously, a declaration was created here in London, and simultaneously back in Punjab, as you can see on the photo on the right, we have Balbir Singh Sandhu, Jatadar Ujagar Singh Randhawa, and Bhai Gopal Singh Shaheed, who were very important, notable figures of the Khalistan movement pre-1984. And then comes down to June 1984, the declaration of war by the Indian state against the Sikh nation, which really alienated the majority of the Sikh populace living not only in the Indian Union, but also to Sikhs living abroad, and most notably in Britain. And come 23rd of June 1984, a large rally, and this particular photo is from the large rally on the 10th of June 1984 at Hyde Park, where we could see Dr. Chohan and Prime Minister Guru-Shaheeds Singh. On the 23rd of June 1984, a meeting was held at Shri Guru Singh Sabha, Havelock Road in Southall, where a 5-member committee was chosen to act as the umbrella body of Sikh activities for independence. The two figures on the far right, Sardar Bhagwan Singh Uppal and Sardar Harbhajan Singh Kolar, they joined the 5-member committee in 1985. So we've had a look at the council now, how it was formed. Let's have a look at who came from Ecuador. Who were the key players? And straight away, we have Dr. Monroy, who we can see on the far left. On his right, we could see Prime Minister Gurmeet Singh Gill. And behind him, we could see Dr. Patricia Buendia, who we'll be looking at the next slide. So Dr. Monroy, a doctor, he was brought up in a political family in the Republic of Ecuador, a lawyer, and most notably was the president of the Republic of Ecuador from 1961. Later on in the 80s, his party formed a coalition alongside the ruling party, and so he was a very important figure at the time. In 1961, where the middle news clipping is from, many of you will find it very interesting to read the second paragraph. We will trade with the devil if he has money. That was back in the 60s. And in the 1980s, the inflation rate for Ecuador was very, very high. And then we come over to Dr. Patricia Buendia. He was employed by the Khalistan Council, and a figure who will be looking at the next slide. And many of you will find the news clipping on the far right even more interesting. And feel free to screenshot any particular slide. I will be going very quickly over every bit, so feel free to make a screenshot wherever you feel necessary. And when Dr. Buendia was speaking to a reporter, he mentioned, I repeat, we have compared the Sikh situation with our own before independence. They have the right to the land in the Republic of Khalistan, which is now occupied by the Indian government. And then we come now down to the chief architect of the Ecuador project, the only Sikh living in Ecuador at the time. And he goes by the name of Atma Singh. And we can pick him out in this particular photo from a conference held by the Khalistan Council at Shepherd's Bush Gurdwara. And we can see him, if you can see on my cursor, the figure here. Over, we can see Gyan Singh Surjit to the front. We can see a gentleman called Dr. Gilani of a Kashmiri separatist group. We could see Bhai Manmohan Singh of the Dal Khalsa, and we could see Jaginder Singh Bal, a key confidant to Dr. Chohan, and a key individual in the early years of the Council of Khalistan. And so Atma Singh was brought up in Milan. He was Italian, and then later became a Sikh and moved to Ecuador. Over to the far right, we have one more little news clipping. And just to mention that's the first photograph of Atma Singh that I have found, leading back to April. And even Dr. Buendia, who mentions for the past 6 months, we have been negotiating with several Sikhs, many who have come to live in Ecuador. So the Ecuador project for the creation of the embassy, it didn't happen overnight. It did take much time and much dedication from the Sikhs living in the UK. And later on, so we've mentioned April 1985. In July 1985, Dr. Monroy, his wife, Dr. Buendia, and another particular figure called Dr. Montero had arrived from Ecuador to meet figures of the Khalistan government in exile. And on arrival of Dr. Monroy and the delegation, not only were the Ecuadorian diplomats, the embassy, figures involved in the embassy here in London, but also Sikhs had arrived to meet him on July 26th. As mentioned, the delegation visited Shepherd's Bush Gurdwara, Sri Guru Singh Sabha Havelock Road, Guru Nanak Gurdwara in Smethwick, and also Gravesend and Slough. And here's a photo of Dr. Monroy. Behind him, we could see President Sardar Singh Lalli. We could see Mrs. Monroy dressed in Khalsabana, and Dr. Jagjit Chohan. And so the visit continued for a week. And I picked out one more particular important figure who we'll be looking a bit more at in the next few slides. Guru-Deep Singh from Wolverhampton, who unfortunately passed away 2 years, but he was deputed by the council to go over to Ecuador in the initial stage and to work there. And so we've mentioned the 5-member committee, we've mentioned who came from Ecuador, we've mentioned Atma Singh, and we've also mentioned Guru-Deep Singh now. And so Ecuador, the question on how and why. As I've mentioned, the inflation rate already of Ecuador being very high. We looked at a quote from Dr. Monroy from 1961. And we can also mention the idea that and even relating it to the modern day, that many Sikhs are involved in the agricultural trade, whether it be in Punjab or even if it may be on the west coast in America, and definitely a lot of money was spent to bring Dr. Monroy here for his stay in hotels and whatnot. So there were many finances which had to be paid. And a quote from Dr. Monroy: "I am fighting to give some land to the Sikh people. Come to Ecuador, it's a good land for the Sikh nation. We can take 20 million. And definitely, having visited the National Archives often, during my time at university, researching the various and looking at the various papers relating to not only the Khalistan movement but Sikhs in generally. And you may like to screenshot this particular slide to maybe read later on in full. But I'll be quickly flicking over a few of the points which are important. So if we look down to point 3, which talks about Dr. Monroy arriving and the Foreign Office speaking to their counterparts at the Ecuador embassy, mentioning who Chohan was and mentioning the complaints which they had. And obviously the British government did not want a fiasco to take place on their soil. Speeding up slightly. Here we have, and so Indian pressure, British pressure against the Ecuador government. the diplomats and the Ecuadorian government had to make a statement saying that Dr. Monroy has come on a personal basis, and he does not represent the government of Ecuador, nor the people of Ecuador, and they recognize the Indian government and nobody else. We moved on to September 1985. A delegation of Sikhs from Birmingham go to Quito, Ecuador, to scout around, to have a look at the agricultural prospects, to have a look at trade and industry, and to see if Sikhs could move to Ecuador, and to see if ultimately if an embassy could be made. Here we have a photo of Atma Singh and Amrit Singh Sahota, who is the current president of the Council of Khalistan in the UK and a member of the World Sikh Parliament. So while the whole story continued, the saga continued, many of you will find interesting that two Sikhs had actually approached the Ecuadorian embassy in London seeking asylum, and once more the Ecuadorian embassy approached the Foreign Office, and the advice the Foreign Office gave was that the ambassador should refuse to see the two Sikhs, not least for fear that if they gained access to the embassy, they would refuse to leave. But the main point the British were worried about, just move back slightly. Apologies. Yeah. So the only reason the government were not as happy is due to it happening on UK soil, which meant that Britain would have had a part to play, which the Indians would not have liked very much. Come October, we have the opening of the embassy in Ecuador. Here are a few photos from Diaspora Sikh, the Punjab newspaper. And in this particular photo, as mentioned, we have Gurdeep Singh from Wolverhampton, and we have a signature from Toronto, who also has unfortunately said his Akhri Fateh to the Sikh nation. And here are a few reports. On the top, we have a news clipping from a local Ecuador newspaper. Down at the bottom, we have a little snippet from the British Embassy Quito, which mentions that the Ecuadorians are keeping the Sikh activities in Ecuador quiet, and they mention who attended the particular opening ceremony, and the British viewpoint were that the Ecuadorian figures who arrived, they could not unfairly be called has-beens. And later on, the embassy continued to work for a good year, a year and a half. And later, Jagjit Singh was deputed and given the responsibility to act as the ambassador of the embassy. I was very lucky to meet Uncle G last year. This photo of me and him at the bottom left. And definitely a very Jardigla individual, a very important individual, and definitely it is worth mentioning his name as well. Time is running very low, so I will be going very quick for the final few bits. It was mentioned, the opening of the embassy was mentioned in the Lok Sabha in the Indian Union, and a member of the Communist Party had brought up the issue. And here we have a little quote from the reply from the various ministers, saying that the government of India and the government of Ecuador only recognize one another as a legitimate government of the country. And following on, there were rumors of an Ecuador Gurdwara and even a potential expansion to Brazil. And the British High Commission in New Delhi summed it up. The saga goes on. There is a bit more research that needs to be done on the Ecuador project and what went on. Today, we've only been looking, due to time constraints, we've only been looking at papers, documents which have been released by at the National Archives, and news clippings and various photographs. I have interviewed many of the individuals who were directly involved and definitely at a later date, we will be bringing all of those particular findings to you all. I'm grateful to Nishan for having me here again today. If you did want to find out more about the activities of Sikhs, the Sikh Nation, the Khalistan government in exile, do check out the Khalistan archive page on Instagram. The archive page and the archive itself is being coordinated by the Aston University Khalistan Society. And hopefully in a year, once we continue working on the archive, producing pamphlets, literature, exhibitions, we hope to not only rewrite forgotten history, but to rewrite future history. And to finish, my time is low. I leave you two little bits from a quote from Dr. Jagjit Singh Chohan from 1988. And he talks about the changed and the changing conditions which now need to be met. And from our side, as time changes, we need to work out and formulate new ways of bringing our collective voice, bringing change, and to continue the movement for independence, which we can trace back to 1849, and to continue playing a role in Guru Nanak's revolution. If you did want to contact me personally, my email is written here, and I'm also reachable at the Khalistan archive on Instagram. I'm happy to take any questions now.
Thank you very much, Simranjeet Singh. That was a very, very interesting presentation. I have a question from Parampal Singh. He's asking, what was the underlying reason for the failure of the Ecuadorian Khalistan in exile?
Right, okay. A difficult question, but there are a few points which I can mention. So at the beginning, I mean, I did have another particular slide, but the pressure which the Indian government had put not only the British government, but also the Ecuadorians under. And even to the modern day, even if we look at the Kisan Morcha, if we look at the rallies which are happening, the Indian government has a very large lobby, which means that their voice can penetrate many different governments, and they are very vocal. But coming back down to the Ecuadorians themselves, Dr. Monroy, who was the main delegate leader here in England and also back in Ecuador, a key friend of the Sikh Nation, his little coalition came to an end following 1986, and he was no longer really a key vocal player in the Ecuador government. And following that, once he was kind of out of the picture, it became very hard for the embassy to continue. And these were kind of the two underlying reasons why. But definitely, my research on Ecuador hasn't finished yet. And hopefully in the near future, I can put all of these reasons into words. But the vocal point of the Indian government and the main figure from Ecuador going out were probably the main two reasons why.
Thank you for that. Arjun Singh is asking, are there any remnants of the Khalistan movement or Sikh communities in general in Ecuador today?
Okay, another very difficult question. I do plan to make a visit to Ecuador at some point. If I do remember correctly, Vice Sardar Singh mentioned that now the Indian consulate works in the building where the Khalistan house used to be. But following on from a change in government, Dr. Monroy leaving and not being a key figure, that kind of led to the main, to a complete change in policy and a complete change of attitude towards Sikhs. And if you do Google Ecuador travel guides on the internet, you'll find that they do list a few countries who won't be given a visa. And a few years back, Sikhs were actually on that list to not receive a visa. But definitely we do look to research more onto that and why it happened. And yeah.
That's great. And Gurbal Singh is asking, I understand that Sikhs are not allowed to go to Ecuador anymore unless they have a special visa. I think you kind of touched upon that already. Okay. And Parampal had another question. He's asking, do you think it is possible for us in the West to create another Khalistan in exile, or would you think it's the best way to go ahead? What is the best way, do you think, to go ahead for a sovereign nation?
Yeah, so we're living in very difficult times, and even from my work at the Aston Uni Khalistan Society, when it comes to the idea of talking about an independent Sikh state, there needs to be a lot more groundwork on it. So far, I mean, we haven't been able to write in lay terms on what Sikh demands are. And even if we look from 1849, even 1947, in Sikh history, Punjab history, we've had many opportunities to relay the voice of Azadi, of independence, but unfortunately we've not been able to take the opportunities which were given to us. For me, and our work at Aston Uni, and even from the Khalistan archive, is to get the Naujawan, to get the intellectual Sikh students thinking more about geopolitics, and even if we look at the Kisan Morcha right now, I mean, the Sikh diaspora needs to do much more when it comes to problems in Punjab. Now, looking forward, looking at the movement, we have the World Sikh Parliament, we have the Khalistan Council, and we have Shamsher Singh, who will be speaking after me. So we do have many organizations who are working at doing prachar, bringing facts to light. And at the minute, from the current state we find ourselves in, whether that be in India, if it be in the world, it's to get educated, to continue working in our relative fields, and it is a very difficult question. But whenever an opportunity rises to once more continue to make steps into forming the Republic of Khalistan, we need to take. But at the minute, we need to work on education.
Okay, final question. Jasveer Singh is asking, do you think there is any potential for something similar to happen today, a nation to recognize Khalistan in some form? Also, seeing what Ecuador did for Assange, is there something innate in their democracy which makes them take such stands?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, the ideal aim for the Sikh nation now is to continue raising the voice for Azadi. I mean, I've been following Punjab politics now, Sikh politics for a good few years now, and I've seen Bagari Morcha, and we're seeing the Kisan Morcha right now. And even if we look at the Dharmiyat Morcha, even if you look at Punjabi Subha movement, unfortunately, as Dr. Chohan stated back in 1971, we only have one option. If we want to protect the Sikh nation, if we want to protect the Punjabi Sikh culture, then we need to strive for independence. And definitely, we need to be working down the correct diplomatic channels, and we need to be working and acting and being diplomats of the Sikh nation. Definitely, following the armed conflict from 1984 to 1995. Definitely, I mean, and Indian propaganda is very high, but it comes down to that we need to continue lobbying MPs, we need to continue becoming MPs, and we need to get our voice out there. And definitely continuing, I mean, the World Sikh Parliament are doing great work at the United Nations, and that all needs to continue. But like I mentioned, many of the individuals who were very active in the 1980s, many of them have said their Akhri Fateh. And now it's for the younger generation, people like myself and everybody here today, where we need to make a stand and read Sikh history, read Gurbani, take an interest in geopolitics, and the aim will always be to make friends across the world who will one day potentially help, as Ecuador did. Hoping that answers the question. Any follow-up questions? I know we don't have time. You feel free to message on Instagram, and I'll put my email as well.
That's great. Thank you so much, Simranjeet. There are a couple more questions in the Q&A tab. If you just check under that tab, and you'll see. You can type your answers there if you'd like.